Imagine waking up, reaching for your coffee, and pressing the power button on your computer like you've done 10,000 times before. And instead of your desktop, you're staring at a screen full of shattered, scrambled pixels. Not a glitch that fixes itself in a second. Not a frozen loading bar. A genuine bone-deep corruption of the display, like your monitor forgot how to speak the same language as your computer. Then the blue screen arrives. Then a message telling you Windows needs to be recovered. You click recover, hopeful, then it crashes. Restarts, crashes again, restarts again. Over and over, an endless loop with no exit ramp. No explanation, and no clue whether the photos, documents, and years of memories sitting on that hard drive are still alive in there or gone forever. You didn't download anything sketchy. You didn't click a strange link. You didn't touch a single setting. You did the one thing every Windows user is told to do without question. You let the update install, and that update is exactly what broke your machine. This isn't a scare story dredged up from some forgotten corner of tech history. This happened in April of 2026, to real people. Well, on real machines, and if you're running Windows 11 today, the uncomfortable truth is that it could happen to you with the very next update Microsoft decides to push. So let's actually walk through what happened. Because most of the coverage skated past the details that matter most. Those details tell you everything about how prepared or unprepared you currently are. On April 14th, 2026, Microsoft rolled out its regular Patch Tuesday update for Windows 11, an update carrying the designation KB5083769. It targeted both the 24H2 and 25H2 builds of Windows 11, which, combined, cover the overwhelming majority of Windows 11 machines currently in use around the world. And here's the part worth sitting with for a second. This wasn't optional. Security updates on Windows never really are. For Home and Pro Edition users, which is to say nearly everyone reading this, there is no permanent way to say no. You can delay it for a while. You can hit snooze a few times. But eventually, usually while you're asleep, it installs itself and you wake up to a machine that's already been changed without your explicit go-ahead. For most people, that update landed exactly the way updates are supposed to, quietly and visibly, without drama. But for a meaningful slice of users, and the reports on this are neither vague nor isolated, the update triggered what might be the worst possible outcome a piece of software can produce. According to a consistent pattern documented across Microsoft's own community forums, independent outlets like Bleeping Computer, PC World, Notebook Check, and Windows Central, here's what unfolded. The update appeared to install without any red flags. The system rebooted like normal. And then, instead of the familiar Windows login screen, users were met with a chaotic mosaic of corrupted graphics, followed swiftly by a blue screen of death. Windows offered its built-in automatic recovery tool. Users clicked it, hoping for the best, and the system looped straight back into the same corrupted screen, the same blue crash, over and over, a cycle people started calling, quite fittingly, a death loop. The only real way out involved booting from an external USB drive, entering the Windows recovery environment, and attempting either a system restore to a point before the update, a startup repair, or, in the harshest cases, a full wipe and reinstall of Windows using media created on an entirely separate working computer. And the hardware affected wasn't some fringe custom-built enthusiast rig. We're talking HP Pavilion laptops, Dell desktops, machines running Ryzen 5 chips paired with GTX 1080 Ti graphics cards, about as mainstream and ordinary as consumer computing gets. These were everyday machines that took an everyday update and came out the other side unable to boot. One user on Microsoft's own support forum described the nightmare in detail. Their HP Envy laptops simply wouldn't start. The recovery environment refused to launch. The classic trick of forcing 3 hard restarts to trigger Windows automatic repair mode did nothing. Booting from a freshly made USB recovery drive to attempt a clean install also failed. And when they turned to Microsoft's support system for help, they described it as little more than AI-generated chatbot responses, with no actual substance behind them. Another user reported something even more unsettling. After successfully uninstalling KB5083769 through recovery tools and pausing future updates, Windows quietly reinstalled the very same update anyway. They did everything right. They removed the problem, they told the system to stop, and the system overruled them. As if the boot loop wasn't damaging enough on its own, KB5083769 carried a second issue that Microsoft eventually admitted to publicly. It was forcing certain machines into BitLocker recovery mode after restart. For anyone unfamiliar, BitLocker is Windows' built-in drive encryption, and it's been quietly turned on by default during setup on a lot of newer, compatible hardware, often without users ever realizing their drive is encrypted at all. So after this update installed and the machine rebooted, some users weren't greeted with a login screen. They were greeted with a demand for a recovery key, a string of numbers most people have never seen, never written down, and have no idea exists. Microsoft's own support documentation confirmed this BitLocker issue was real, that it depended on specific configurations involving custom boot validation policies and secure boot certificate setups, and, critically, that there was no emergency out-of-band patch rushed out to fix it. The official guidance simply pointed people back toward the Windows recovery environment. A system restore or a full reset. Picture that for a second. You're staring at a locked screen demanding a code you've never heard of. You go looking for help. And the official advice is to use the very recovery tools that other users reported weren't working in the first place. For an unprepared, non-technical user, that's not a minor inconvenience. That's a computer that no longer works, holding files, photos, and years of personal history, hostage behind a recovery process most people have no idea how to execute. Here's what should really make your blood boil, though. None of this was some once-in-a-blue-moon fluke. Anyone who's used Windows for any length of time knows updates occasionally cause hiccups. That's old news. But 2025 and early 2026 pushed things into an entirely different category. Independent outlets stopped treating these as isolated headlines and started tracking them as a full-blown systemic pattern. Windows. Latest published an extensive breakdown in January 2026, cataloging more than 20 major, widely reported update failures across 2025 alone. Not 20 minor annoyances, 20 significant, well-documented incidents that hit millions of users across gaming performance, developer tools, file management, login systems, shutdown behavior, and remote access, spread across essentially every month of the year. That breadth tells its own story. It doesn't look like a company having one bad quarter. It looks like a company whose engineering priorities quietly shifted, pouring resources into wedging Copilot and AI features into every nook of the operating system, while the unglamorous, essential work of actually testing updates before shipping them to over 1 billion devices slipped through the cracks. Take October 2025's KB5066835, a mandatory update for both 24H2 and 25H2 that broke localhost connections, the very backbone developers rely on to build and test software on their own machines. One update, and suddenly countless developers found their local environments broken with zero warning. That same update also triggered a false security warning in File Explorer's preview pane, flagging completely harmless, ordinary files as potentially dangerous. A month later, November's optional update introduced jarring white flashes in File Explorer for anyone using dark mode, and hid the password icon Windows Hello users rely on to sign in. Earlier in the year, a separate bug caused Task Manager to spawn invisible duplicate instances in the background, silently eating away at performance, hitting hardest on older, lower-end machines, least equipped to absorb the loss. Then January 2026 arrived with KB507419, which caused black screens on certain machines and froze Outlook accounts configured with POP settings. Microsoft had to scramble out emergency fixes within weeks of the year even starting, after that same update left some users unable to fully shut down their PCs, and others locked out of signing in remotely via remote desktop. Stop and think about that for a second. A routine monthly update took away people's ability to shut off their own computer or log in remotely. Microsoft acknowledged the severity was serious enough to require emergency, unscheduled patches. That's not a normal week in software maintenance. Out-of-band emergency patches exist for critical security threats being actively exploited by attackers in the wild, not as damage control for a mess your own update created. Yet that's precisely what happened twice in the first few weeks of 2026, with KB507744 and KB50797 both requiring emergency intervention to undo damage from Microsoft's own scheduled release. The frustration isn't just scattered form grumbling either. It's measurable, widespread, and consistent. Windows latest has gone as far as describing Windows 11 as disliked by nearly everyone actively discussing it online, and the evidence backs that up. The Windows 11 subreddit, Microsoft's own community forums, comment sections on Windows Central, and Hacker News threads that reliably surface every single Patch Tuesday cycle have all become informal dumping grounds for frustration that is nowhere official to land. Because here's the uncomfortable reality. Microsoft doesn't run a consumer phone support line for individual Windows update problems. If your machine won't boot at 11 at night because an update installed while you were sleeping, your options are searching the internet, stumbling onto a forum post from a stranger 3 time zones away with symptoms that vaguely match yours, scrolling through 30 replies of mixed reliability, and hoping somewhere in there is a fix that happens to work for your specific hardware. When Microsoft does respond, it's often hours or days later, buried as a quiet known issue entry on a release health dashboard tucked several clicks deep into their support site, written in dense technical language, essentially invisible to anyone who doesn't already know exactly where to look. And here's what makes the whole situation even more precarious going forward. Microsoft has been leaning harder into an automated, machine learning-driven rollout system that decides on its own schedule and by its own internal criteria when your particular PC is ready to be upgraded to the next Windows version. In April 2026, Microsoft confirmed it was expanding automatic rollout of Windows 11 25H2 to essentially all unmanaged home and pro devices still running 24H2, or meaning ordinary personal computers with no corporate IT department managing them. The algorithm decides you're ready, and the upgrade simply arrives. You can choose when to reboot. You cannot permanently opt out. And there's a real deadline attached. Windows 11 24H2 reaches end of support on October 13th, 2026, after which it stops receiving security patches or technical support altogether. The message to consumers is blunt: move to 25H2, whether it's on your terms or not, or run a machine that's exposed with no further protection. There's no comfortable third option for anyone on a standard home or pro license. What makes the timing genuinely alarming is that KB50836769, the very update causing death loops and BitLocker lockouts, landed right in the middle of this expanded 25H2 rollout push. A defective update wasn't arriving in a vacuum. It was arriving at the exact moment Microsoft was actively funneling more and more machines onto the very software versions that update was breaking, which means the pool of potentially vulnerable computers was growing in real time, even as the problems tied to that update were becoming publicly known. As of these reports, Microsoft had not issued a dedicated emergency patch for the boot loop issue. The guidance remained the same manual recovery process, which, again, several users reported simply didn't work for them. To Microsoft's credit, they did eventually respond to the broader outrage by announcing a new pause feature that's supposed to give users an easier way to delay updates through settings. But right now it's only being tested with Windows insiders, not rolled out to the general public. And even once it does arrive, read the fine print carefully. It's a pause, not a permanent opt-out. It buys you time. It doesn't hand you control. The fundamental structure: Microsoft decides when your machine updates. You decide, at best, how long you can stall it. Remains fully intact. A separate change, letting new PC owners skip parts of the initial setup process, was also introduced. But that has nothing to do with the ongoing monthly stream of updates every Windows machine keeps receiving for its entire lifespan. So, given all of that, what should you actually do about it? Because this isn't meant to send you into a panic. It's meant to get you prepared. Because the people who genuinely lose files and lose access to their machines in situations like this are almost always the people who had no idea what to prepare for in the first place. Not because they were careless, but because nobody ever walked them through it. Start with the simplest step. Create a manual system restore point right now, before the next update you didn't ask for shows up. Open your Start menu, search for Create a Restore Point, open it, and click Create. It takes under 2 minutes and gives you a genuine fallback if a future update leaves your system unstable. Next, track down your BitLocker recovery key, especially if your device has encryption enabled, which, again, may have happened automatically without you ever noticing. Log into the Microsoft account tied to your Windows device, head to the Devices section, and look for a stored recovery key. Write it down somewhere physical, somewhere you can access even if your computer itself is the thing that's locked. Remember, being able to log into your Microsoft account isn't the same as having that key in hand. If the machine holding your login is the one that's broken, that convenience disappears exactly when you need it most. After that, build yourself a Windows recovery drive. Grab a USB stick with at least 8 gigabytes of storage, search Create a Recovery Drive in the Start menu, follow the prompts, and then store that drive somewhere you'll actually remember. If your PC refuses to boot after an update, that little USB stick is the single thing standing between you and a total reinstall from scratch. And finally, the step that matters most of all, back up your data somewhere that isn't the same drive Windows itself lives on. An external hard drive, a cloud storage service, an external SSD, anything that doesn't share the same fate as your main system drive if Windows corrupts itself on boot. None of these steps require any technical wizardry. Together, they take under an hour, and most of them take 5 minutes or less. But that hour could be the entire difference between a bad update that ruins your afternoon and a bad update that permanently costs you the photos, documents, and work you can never get back. The restore point takes 2 minutes. Tracking down your BitLocker key takes about 3 once you know exactly where to look. Building a recovery USB takes roughly half an hour you can spend doing something else entirely. The backup is the one task that genuinely eats real time. But it's also the one that matters most, because everything else on this list can eventually be rebuilt. Your files can't. Nothing about Microsoft's update pipeline is going to fundamentally shift between now and the next Patch Tuesday. These updates aren't suddenly becoming optional, and Windows 11's well-documented track record of mandatory updates causing serious, sometimes catastrophic problems hasn't reversed course between everything. cataloged throughout 2025 and what's already happened in 2026. What can change is whether you're ready when it happens to your machine, because based on 16 straight months of documentation across public forums, independent tech journalism, and even Microsoft's own support channels, the question was never really whether a future update would cause serious damage somewhere in the fleet. That's already been answered, repeatedly, with hard evidence. The only question that's still open is whether your machine happens to be in that unlucky subset when the next one lands, and whether you'll have everything in place to get through it when it does. The shattered pixels, the blue screen, the endless recovery loop, the demand for a key you've never seen in your life. It happened to ordinary people on ordinary HP laptops and Dell desktops in April of 2026. It happened in January when machines couldn't shut down. It happened in October when developers lost the ability to test their own code locally, and there's no real reason to believe it stops here, because the system producing these incidents hasn't actually changed. The one thing you still have complete control over is how ready you are. So take the hour. Make the restore point, find that recovery key, build that USB drive, but back up what matters, because the evidence has already told you it's going to happen again. The only thing left to find out is when it's going to be your turn.